Welcome, everyone. My name's Duncan Pritchard. I'm the director of the Centre for Knowledge, Technology and Society. We're a new centre. We've not been going that long, but we have quite an extensive remit. And one of the main things we're trying to do is broaden the conversation around epistemology to relate it to interdisciplinary topics, to applied topics. But we're also trying to sort of broaden the geographic focus of epistemology as well. And that's why we started this new lecture series called the Global Epistemology Lecture Series, to have perspectives on epistemological questions from around the world. And I'm delighted to say that our first lecturer in this series is Chienkuo, who's a distinguished professor of philosophy at Soochow University in Taipei, Taiwan. He's done a great deal of distinguished work relating analytical epistemology to Chinese philosophy, especially with regard to Confucianism. And today he's going to be talking about Ernest Sosa's important work on virtue epistemology and its relationship to Confucianism. If you've been following our lecture series, as it happens, Ernest Sosa was one of the, he's been a lecturer in this last academic year. He gave the Social and Applied lecture series on his new book, and we were delighted to have him. So it's very appropriate that we now have Chienkuo talking about Ernest's work in the context of Confucianism. And I'll just say, since I have the audience here, that we've already started inviting we have our next global epistemology lecture already lined up. So I'll put a plug in for that too. And that's going to be Professor Janardhan Ganeri, who's the Bimal K. Matilal Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at Toronto University. And he's going to be talking about epistemology and classical Indian philosophy. So we've got a treat coming up there too. Okay, then, so I will now hand you over to our esteemed lecturer. So Chienkuo is going to be talking about, the title of his talk is Bi-Level Virtue Epistemology, Ernest Sosa and Confucianism. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Duncan. Yeah. So it's my honor to be here online. And thank you, Professor Pritchard, for inviting me to this global epistemology lecture series. It's really my honor, being the first lecturer. Yeah. So I try to be global for my talk. So my talk today will actually bring in material from mostly from Confucius and also from Ernest Sosa. Okay, so let me start my PPT, my slide. So I hope you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. And then I play. Okay. So you can see my PPT, okay? Okay, good. So let me begin. As Duncan has introduced my talk, the topic is about bi-level virtue epistemology. So I will begin now. Okay, I have argued that the analects of Confucius presents us with a full conception of reflection with two components, a retrospective component and a perspective component. The former one involves the hindsight or careful examination of the past, and as such, draws on previous learning or memory and previously formed beliefs to avoid error. The later one is foresight or forward-looking, and as such, looks to existing beliefs and various factors in order to hit the target or achieve knowledge. The retrospective reflection is thinking backward, or 行. You can see the red one, the red character in Chinese. A backward-looking reflection plays a role like a searching alarm, which retrieves and inspects beliefs, thoughts, and the representation in the short-term or long-term memory of the agent, who is examining any wrongdoing or mistake of his or hers in the past, and is seeking his or her best way to avoid and improve them in the future. Perspective reflection is a thinking forward, or 思 in Chinese, a forward-looking reflection, plays a role like a guiding light, which lays out and shines through objective evidence, information, and models in the conscious and the conscientious mind of the agent, who is thinking and making a choice of the right way to perform and endeavor to attain his or her aim and goal, whatever the aim or goal may be. In this talk, I would like to reinforce the idea of the skillful reflection in the framework of bilevel virtue epistemology, from both Ernest Sosa's perspective and the background of Chinese philosophy. The point of bilevel virtue epistemology, strictly speaking, is not to propose that there are different kinds of knowledge. The point is rather to emphasize the different kinds of competence or cognitive capacity, which can help us acquire knowledge and gain certain epistemic status, either through the first-order competence or cognitive mechanism, or by adding the second-order competence or metacognition on top of the given first-order one. So even for Confucius' two levels of knowledge, the focus of distinguishing different levels of knowledge is not on the knowledge per se, but on the different ways of achieving knowledge. For Confucius, the lower level knowledge can be attained simply by our five senses or memory, while the higher level or the best kind of knowledge can only be achieved by manifesting our skillful reflection. So let me quote a passage from the Analects. Confucius say, quote, "There may be those who act without knowing why. I do not do so. Hearing much and selecting what is good and following it, seeing much and keeping it in memory. This is the second style of knowledge, or a lower level of knowledge, so-called." There are actually two parts in this passage. Both of them can be explained and shown to shed light on the distinction between first level and the second level knowledge. In the first part, Confucius distinguishes the kind of practical knowledge, 识 or 智 in Chinese, that is needed for action, and the kind of knowledge, wisdom, 知 or 行 in Chinese, that consciously grasps the reason why one should act as one does. The former kind of knowledge can be categorized as first-level knowledge necessary for carrying out those actions and performance in everyday life. The latter sort of knowledge, however, requires not only that you know how to act or what to do, but also that you know that or the reason why you know to act and what to do. That is the sort of second-level knowledge. It is obvious that Confucius endorses the higher-level knowledge, which relies on the second-order cognitive competence or mechanism, because he doesn't just act without grasping the reason why he needs to act. Of the second part, Confucius goes a step further to explain and clarify what the first level knowledge is like, while he also makes his value judgment and subordinates the first level knowledge beneath the sort of knowledge, while he is in favor of the second level knowledge. The sort of first level knowledge is acquired mostly through our five senses. You learn from hearing much and seeing much, and you keep it in your memory. The resources of what you have learned through those first order cognitive mechanisms and then kept them in your memory will later in your life help you recognize or identify them again and become your practical abilities. They are, of course, very useful and reliable tools of our everyday life in encountering different situations and steering around in the world. However, the superior kind of knowledge or knowledge ranked as higher level will require something more, which either looks for some higher order cognitive mechanism or asks for some superior intellectual virtues. The best kind of knowledge or wisdom has to be learned and possessed through what I have called the skillful reflection. Again, let me quote one more passage from the Analects. Confucius says, quote, "Yo, should I teach you what knowledge is? When you know a thing, to hold that you know it. And when you don't know a thing, to allow that you don't know it. That is knowledge." Or most of people say, that is wisdom. The main point of this idea about what knowledge, the higher level knowledge or wisdom is, indicates the manifestation of the right kind of self-knowledge, which for Confucius requires not only knowing that you know something when you know it, but also knowing that you don't know something when you don't know it. It is only when you really know both that you actually know something and that you don't really know something do you possess the best kind of knowledge or wisdom. But first, what accounts for the difference between simply knowing, merely know something, and possessing knowledge, the kind of self-knowledge that knowing that you know and also knowing that you don't know, which will help us go from first level knowing to second level knowing on Confucius' view. Skill reflecting on what we are learning or what we know or knew can elevate the epistemic status of our knowledge to a higher level cognitive state, or simply put, to second level knowledge. The full conception of reflection, as I mentioned above, is dual aspect, second order cognitive mechanism. It involves both retrospective, looking backward reflection, and the perspective, looking forward reflection. And it is a higher order metacognition, which can look over our first order cognitive capacity. So in order to know that you know, in case that you do know, you will need perspective knowledge, perspective reflection, carefully thinking ahead over different situations and surrounding environment beyond the bodily cognitive capacity for evaluating and integrating evidence information with situation environment and the ability competence, and making a judgment or choose the right way to attain the truth and to achieve the epistemic goal. On the other hand, in order to know that you don't know, in case that you don't really know, you would need retrospective reflection, deliberately looking back on the past of oneself for retrieving and inspecting beliefs and thoughts in the short-term or long-term memory of yourself, and examining any wrongdoing or mistakes in the past and seeking the best way to avoid them and improve them in the future. To make this bilevel virtue epistemology more clearly and more significantly, it is important to notice the following two types of cognitive or psychological processes. So we have type 1, first level. The type 1 cognitive process or psychological process includes our 5 senses. They are simply seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. And also simply memorizing, which is our memory. Also reasoning. So we have simply reasoning. And the last one is introspection, which is simply introspecting. But we also have the type 2 cognitive process, which involve reflection of 5 senses. We can say it's like reflectively, attentively, or consciously seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. And also reflection of memory. So we have reflectively, attentively, or consciously memorizing or remembering. And also reflection of reasoning, reflectively, attentively, or consciously reasoning. And the last one, reflection of retrospection, which is reflectively, attentively, or consciously introspecting. Now, the type 1 process, cognitive psychological, cognitive or psychological, involve only the first order cognitive mechanism, while type 2 process apply not only the first order cognitive mechanism, but also the metacognition or higher order competence. It is also important to realize the fact that we cannot have only employed our higher order cognition without using or functioning any first order cognitive mechanism, in which case it is like to reflect on, be conscious of, or pay attention to nothing at all. And that is why Confucius say that learning without reflecting is blind, while reflecting without learning is empty. In order to learn, we have to equip with the kind of first level cognitive capacity or mechanism. They are 5 senses: memory, reasoning, intuition, and probably testimony, or through testimony. However, on top of those capacities, we also need our higher order intellectual ability, the skillful reflection, to enlighten our way to the intellectual height of wisdom, and to guide us to achieve the superior epistemic status. Now, in modern usage of Chinese language, the ways of expression concerning our cognitive processes or psychological states usually consist of and combine 2 different Chinese characters. For example, knowledge by the expression of Chinese 知识, as we have shown above. In addition, sense perception by the expression of 感觉, thinking by 思想, hearing by 听闻, seeing by 看见, and many more. I will explain those different cases one and one in the following. So first, these 2 words expression all combine and confuse the different levels of cognitive mechanism or process in question. So the first one on the screen here, on the slide, 知识 in Chinese, 2 characters, means knowledge. It actually combines 知, okay? It means knowledge, wisdom, the higher level epistemic status, and the word 识, which means memory or recognition, and it is the first level cognitive status. The next case or example, 感觉 in Chinese actually mean perception in modern Chinese, and it combines the word 感, okay, and this word means sensing, and it's a first order cognitive sensing, and also with the word 觉, okay, it's consciousness. We can interpret or translate this word, and it is a higher order cognitive state, which is conscious of the sense perception. Now we also have thought, 思想. One moment. Okay, 思想 in English is thought. It combines 想, 思 first, which is reflection, and it's a high order metacognition and can reflect on the first order thinking. And with the second word, 想, it's merely thinking. It's a first order cognitive mechanism. 听闻, again, two words. In English, it means hearing, okay? And it combines 听, it's only hearing, the first order cognitive sensing, or hearing, and 闻, which means listening carefully or hearing attentively. It's a higher order attention to the hearing. One more. 看见 means seeing. It actually combines 看 or 视, seeing, the first order cognitive sensing or seeing, with the second word 见, which is watching carefully and seeing attentively. Again, it's a higher order attention to the seeing. Ironically, all those Chinese words above were all used individually in the ancient history of Chinese philosophy without combining with each other, and can stand for their own proper cognitive or psychological state without confusing their different levels of epistemic status. So for example, another important Confucianist, his name is Mencius. So in Mencius, he mentions that we can hear something without listening to it, and we can see something without watching it carefully. So in Chinese, it's 视而不见, 听而不闻. Also, we can go into an audio-video room. In Chinese, it's 视听教室, audio-video room, without broadening our horizons. In Chinese, 增广见闻. So an audio-video room provides only an opportunity of hearing or seeing something through our first-order auditory visual capacity. But it is our reflection or attention, our higher order cognitive abilities that help us grasp the opportunity and acquire, extend our knowledge, and thus broaden our horizon. Okay, so that's the idea of bi-level cognitive processes. Now, we will turn to Ernest Sosa. So as for Sosa, he has long been proposing the distinction between animal knowledge and reflective knowledge, and holding on to different grades of knowledge. To better explain his view, I would like to bring in Sosa's framework of performance-based normativity. Performance is a very broad or general concept which can cover all kinds of performance. They include art, sports, morality, cognition, philosophy, science, various professional performance, and even functional performance. And no matter what performance it may be, any action or function as a kind of performance is always goal-oriented. And as such, there are three elements of which a good performance must have, according to Sosa's proposal. They are accuracy, adroitness, and aptness. So an archer's shot, to repeat Sosa's famous example, would be accurate if it hits a target. It will be adroit if the archer shoots skillfully, and it will be apt if the accurate shot is because of or manifests the archer's adroit skill This is called by Sosa the AAA model of evaluating a performance. A good performance requires the presence of all three elements. Similarly, I use another example. When it comes to a good piano performance, the performance should be accurate. There should be a correct rendition of the target piece, and the performance will be adroit in that the performer will be competent. That's not all, however. A really good piano performance will be apt. What is meant by this is that the performance will be accurate because of adroitness. In epistemology, belief forming process as a cognitive performance follows the same structure or the same model above. A belief is accurate if and only if it's true. The formation of belief may be adroit. The belief may be formed because of perception, memory, deduction, or other competent ways of forming beliefs. Crucially, a belief is apt if and only if the belief is accurate, that is true, because of adroitness, with showing performers or believers epistemic or intellectual virtues. Now, as Sosa also pointed out that Aristotle expresses the very same idea in his works as well. Quote from Aristotle: "It is possible to do something that is in accordance with the laws of grammar, either by chance or at the suggestion of another. A man will be a grammarian then only when he has both done something grammatical and done it grammatically. And this means doing it in accordance with the grammatical knowledge in itself." Now, let me read this up for short, or the example above. A man can do something grammatical or some virtuous thing, and therefore such doing is itself accurate. A man can also do something grammatically or virtuously, and he therefore shows his competence or adroitness. But a man can be called a genuine grammarian or a truly virtuous agent only if he has done some grammatical things grammatically or some virtuous thing virtuously. The grammarian or a virtuous agent has therefore been performing aptly. In addition to performance-based normativity, it is also important to notice that Sosa emphasized very much of the bilevel performance or his bilevel virtue epistemology. So now let's consider Diana's performance again using Sosa's own example. An archer simply fires his arrow and hits the target because of the first order competence of the archer. Now a more skilled huntress may get the same result. She too may hit the target, and it may be said that she too hit the target because of ability. A good shot by an archer is a first order apt performance. However, shot selections will be integral to the competence of Diana, the huntress. The agent, Diana the huntress, must perform aptly in order to perform full well or fully apt, not only in light of her higher order apt belief that she would perform first order aptly, but also guided by the higher order belief. Diana thus needs the higher order competence to assess her own first order competence and its required condition, such as her personal shape and the situational conditions as well. She needs to make the risk assessment carefully before the shot is taken. Diana's shot will be apt if and only if its accuracy manifests Diana's adroitness. It will be reflectively competent, manifesting Diana's higher order aptness if and only if it corresponds to a competent higher order awareness that her shot will be apt. Diana's great skill may be manifest in her performance, and that at least some of this greater skill may be accounted for as second order competence. while the more skilled huntress may fire her arrow in just the same way as the performance by the normal archer. The thought is that when manifesting greater skill, she will be at least sensitive to matters, such as whether the wind is likely to affect her shot, whether there are any unseen obstacles to a successful performance. Now, knowledge performance or belief forming process as a kind of cognitive performance is a special case for this bilevel performance again. We might call the kind of epistemology involved here a kind of bilevel virtue epistemology. Performance with a full aptness would normally require knowing that one would then perform aptly. This is the knowledge that must guide one's performance, cognitive performance, if it is to be fully apt. Epistemic agents do not just aim for correctness of affirmation, they also judge, aiming for aptness of affirmation. So even a properly confident subject who affirmed aptly might fail with his judgment. Because even while affirming aptly in the endeavor to affirm correctly, he might fail to judge aptly. In other words, the epistemic agent's alectic affirmation aimed at the truth might be apt at the first order without being fully apt, in which case his judgment would not be apt at the higher order. Judgment is affirmation in the endeavor to affirm aptly. In judgment, one aims to alectically affirm aptly. Judgmental affirmation that P must hence manifest competence, not only to get it right on the question of whether P, but also to do so aptly. In order for judgment to be apt, then the subject must aptly attain aptness of affirmation. However, the importance of the reflective ability is not explained fully until we see what really matters here, namely that the aptness on the first order be attained under the guidance of the second order awareness. The performance on the first level must be guided to aptness through the second order awareness, either explicit or implicit, that the subject is in that instance competent to avoid excessive risk of failure. Okay, now with the background of Chinese philosophy and the perspective of Ernest Sosa's philosophy, we can try to use the AAA model of the performance-based normativity and a framework of bilevel performance and apply them to different issues involved in the Eastern and Western philosophy. This way, we can also test and show the significance of the idea of bilevel virtue epistemology. So first, let's try out. The first trial will be tested on the issue regarding what wisdom is like in the Chinese Confucian tradition. And this issue will be explored based on a well-known Confucian approach toward learning to become an ideal person. Human life is a process of continuous learning. We learn to know, we learn to act, and learn to become an ideal person. So Confucius say in his analect, isn't it nice and pleasant to keep learning something and then to reflect on it and to make good use of it? Learning to become an ideal person in our lifelong process of learning and education is probably more fundamental and important than learning to know and learning to act, in the sense that the achievement of the former actually involves and requires the attainment of the later. So learning to become an ideal person contains three crucial elements in which the issues involved are all normative in their nature, to be reminded of the AAA model of the performance-based normativity there. So the three elements here are that first, an ideal person. The second one is about learning. And the third one, to become or to be. First of all, the idea of an ideal person, we have to distinguish it from the concept of a human being. We don't need to learn in order to become a human, because we are born biologically as a human being already. However, we do need to learn in order to become the kind of person we want to be, and not just a different kind of animal. To be sure, we all want to be and need to learn to become an ideal person or an excellent person. It is less clear, though, what exactly an ideal person means, or what has to be fulfilled in order to exemplify the excellency. In the process of learning to become an ideal person, becoming the kind of great person we strive to be is the goal here. If we successfully attain the goal, then this performance of becoming an ideal person will be accurate. It is a successful performance, fulfilling the first A, accuracy, in the AAA model. A kind of ideal person here, according to the Western tradition, could be a rational person, a philosopher, or a happy person. In Chinese tradition, especially the Confucian tradition, the kind of ideal person would be normatively graded from the best downwards as a sage, a saint, a gentleman, and a scholar official. In Chinese, it's 圣贤君子与士大夫. If anyone here understands Chinese. Of course, in our everyday life, we can pursue of being an excellent and happy person with great success in various professions, careers, or different practices. Confucius said the wise are not puzzled, the benevolent are not worried, and the brave are not afraid. So to exemplify an ideal person, a gentleman or a sage, we must learn to know full well with the wisdom, to act full well with benevolence, and to have a heart fully filled with bravery or courage in order to know better and to act better. So an ideal person for Confucius must possess three most important virtues: wisdom, benevolence, and courage. These virtues can be either intellectual virtues or moral virtues. And the result of being an ideal person is that the person must have no confusion, no worry, and no fear. Now, secondly, regarding the idea of learning, it needs to be explained why we learn, what we learn, and how we learn. It is not the case that every successful act or performance must be valuable. A successful performance may not be praiseworthy if the success comes only as a matter of luck and does not show the worth of the performer. An ideal person is a person who can really manifest his or her virtues, excellency, or competence. And so it will fulfill the second A, adroitness, of the AAA model. In order to be a kind of person we strive to be, we must learn the kind of virtues, moral as well as intellectual, or the needed knowledge to equip us with the related ability and the competence or characteristic in order to achieve our goal. Learning to know and learning to act are like the two sides of the same coin. When we know more, we can act better. When we act more, we can know more. For most of Confucius, to know and to act are one. They should be unified. If we can know full well and act full well, the virtue of wisdom involved in our intellectual endeavor and the virtue of practical wisdom involved in benevolence will be manifested as one, and we are on our way to become an ideal person. Now, in addition to accuracy and adroitness, we still need to be apt. That is, accurate because of adroit. But where is this norm of aptness shown in the idea of learning to be a person? Actually, it is a relation of to become or to be, which connect learning and an ideal person that shows aptness in the idea, the third A, aptness. So thirdly and lastly, the idea of to become or to be as a relation between learning and an ideal person also deserves a close look and careful examination. Whether the connection between learning and the becoming an ideal person is a causal relation, a teleological direction, or an essential connection. To become or to be will eventually share light and have some great impact on the issues and discussion in question. There are two different senses of to become in learning to become an ideal person in Chinese. 学以成人, 成, there are two meanings there. First, becoming can refer to successfully attaining, which is like success, successful in Chinese. Successfully attain its goal. That is becoming an ideal person in the sense that the success may be just luckily attained without showing or manifesting any worth or virtue of the agent. However, it can also mean the personal achievement. Okay, success here is different from the achievement here. It's 成就 in Chinese of the agent who strived for becoming the kind of person she or he performs the lifetime learning in order to manifest the required virtue or characters and the related competence of the person. The agent who can deserve the full credit or the praiseworthiness of his or her successful lifelong performance must not only fulfill the first order attainment of the goal, becoming the right kind of person, but also manifest the ultimate goods required for achieving the higher order aim of an ideal person, and so fulfill the third A, aptness of the triple A model. So when you can skillfully reflect on what you are learning and have learned, you can know full well that you know in case that you do know, and also know full well that you don't know in case that you don't really know. And when you have equipped with both perspective reflection and the retrospective reflection, you will have the kind of wisdom to deal with all kinds of hard choices, intellectual, moral, or practical in your life. And this is probably the most important virtue you need to learn and to have in order to become an ideal person. Now, the second tryout will be tested on the issue regarding the personal identity, respect to Western philosophy again, and or the problem of self or mind. We will set out to use the idea of bilevel cognitive performance and to show that the metaphysical curse of the mind-body problem in the Western philosophy should be exorcised. Now, regarding what the mind, the self, or the agent really stands for, we can look back to the history and see how different philosophers express their different attitudes and positions. I will first quote from three most important philosophers involved in the debates here. They are Descartes, David Hume, and Thomas Reid. So first, let's quote from Descartes' Meditations 2. So let me quote here. I must finally conclude that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. But I do not yet have a sufficient understanding of what this I is, that now necessarily exists. But what then am I? A thing that thinks. What is that? A thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, is willing, is unwilling, and also imagines and has sensory perceptions, end quote. Now the second one, I quote from David Hume, A Treatise of Human Nature. So let's quote here. There are some philosophers who imagine we are every moment intimately conscious of what we call ourself, that we feel its existence and is continuous in existence, and are certain, beyond the evidence of demonstration, both of its perfect identity and simplicity. But for my part, when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception. I never can observe anything but perception, end quote. Now the third one, I quote from Thomas Reid, from his essays on the intellectual power of man. So let me quote here. My personal identity, therefore, implies the continual existence of that indivisible things, which I call myself. Whatever this self may be, it is something which thinks and deliberates and resolves and acts and suffers. I am not thought, I am not action, I am not feeling. I am something that thinks and acts and suffers. My thought and action and feelings change every moment. They have no continuum, but a successive existence. But that self or I to which they belong is permanent and has the same relation to all the succeeding thoughts, actions, and feelings, which I call mine, end quote. So the dialectical style of dialogue among philosophers above has their debates not only on the metaphysical issue regarding do I exist or am I, and who am I, or what is self or mine, but also on the epistemological issues about how do I know that I exist or not, and how do I know who I am or what is self is. Now, for me, to avoid the fruitless discussions in metaphysics we have seen from the traditional philosophers, why don't we reflect on the issues from the epistemological perspective and try to view the issue on the basis of a bi-level cognitive mechanism or process? Now, my suggestion is this. If we reflect on Descartes' idea of I, or self, or mine, I am a thing that thinks, a thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, is willing, is unwilling, and also imagines and has sensory perception. It is not so difficult to view the I here, or the agent that thinks, as a metacognitive capacity. And while to view all those doubts, understanding, affirming, denying, willing, imagine, and sensory perception as a first-order cognitive mechanism. Now this suggestion, the same can go with Hume and Reid. So reflecting on Hume, he claims that when I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hate, pain or pleasure. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. But this idea of I, or self, or the agent entering the scene here can also be viewed as a metacognitive capacity, which is observing all those first-order perceptions. Now, reflecting on Reid, he wants to argue that whatever this self may be, it is something which thinks and deliberates and resolves and acts and suffers. And he said, I'm not the thought, I'm not action, I'm not feeling, I'm not something that thinks and acts and suffers. But again, this idea of self or agent that thinks and deliberates and resolve and act and suffer can also be viewed as a metacognitive capacity, which has all the first order cognitions or actions as its object in view. Okay, now I had actually the third tryout, which will be tested on the problem of forgetting, a problem raised by me, myself, Chienkuo me, in the philosophy of memory in a book chapter will be published soon. I will apply the idea of bi-level cognitive process to show that forgetting can be an intellectual virtue that can help us gain knowledge too. But I think the stuff here is too long. I don't have enough time to show you my third tryout here. But the book chapter will come out soon, so you will be able to check when the book come out. So I think I will end here. Okay, Duncan? Okay, so final. Let me show this and read it again. To know that you know and to know that you don't know, that is wisdom, say by Confucius. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Chienkuo. I should say to his friends, we call him Michael. So if I move back and forth, Michael and Chienkuo, but thanks, Michael. That was a very interesting talk, fascinating. Here's what we're going to do. Yeah, so I see Ryan's already put this in the chat, actually. If you want to ask a question, then please put your hand up. So it's under... either put your question in the Q&A, or you can put it in participants. If you go to there, you can see there's the icon. Oh, in fact, you've got it at the bottom actually. Raise hand. There's a raise hand icon at the bottom. Sometimes it's under participant. You might not see it, Michael, because
okay.
Usually the host doesn't see it. That's why I was a bit confused. But everyone else sees it. So whenever anyone's ready, put your hand up. And I have lots of questions. So. So maybe what we were, so please do, because if I miss it, someone alert me if I've missed a question. So I'm looking, but obviously I can't always see what's there. But maybe I'll ask something just to get things going while people are mulling over their question.
Okay.
So
can we do it one by one?
Sorry, Michael.
I mean, can we do it one by one?
Don't yes, no, we do. Well, yes, of course. Yeah. No, I'll just do one just now. So let me start up with, I'll just ask a clarificatory thing. And I'm not sure if a lot hangs on this, but I noticed that a lot of the quotations when you're talking about Confucius and that tradition, the emphasis is specifically on reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this might be a point of contrast with Sosa, because Sosa talks about the second level is a higher level. So it's second order. It's a kind of second order knowing. But it needn't, although he calls it sometimes reflective, it needn't actually involve any reflection, right? So it could be spontaneous, it could be immediate, it needn't involve any, it could involve reflection, but it needn't. What makes it second order is the fact that it's knowing of knowledge. It's a meta-aptness. And I wonder whether, is this a real distinction between the two, or, is Sosa wrong? Should Sosa beef up the second order and make it essentially reflective? Or is the Confucian idea of reflection one that's compatible with a kind of spontaneous reflection? So like to be reflective, it could be like, it needn't involve an current mental state, the actual reflecting. It could be spontaneous. And I think, by the way, this relates, a bit of context, I think this relates to Aristotle. Because the Aristotelian conception of virtue and of wisdom, it might characteristically involve reflection, but it could also be spontaneous. In fact, ideally, it is spontaneous. The wise person, they instinctively sees the right thing to do and knows the right thing to do. They don't even need, it becomes second nature. They don't even need to reflect. It becomes, so it's second order, right? Because there's a meta-aptness in play, but it doesn't necessarily involve any actual state of reflection. So that's kind of my question. Is the Confucian model, is it distinct from the Greek model? Does it essentially involve a current state of reflection, or is that just to misread those quotations?
Okay, yeah, I think it is not conflicting. It doesn't conflict. Okay, it can be spontaneous, no problem. Okay, because it's a cognitive process. Okay, if the process only involve like our five senses, okay, it's a process of seeing, simply seeing. But it can be a process of higher order. Okay, so it is simultaneous in the sense that in this process, you are seeing, okay, but you are not only seeing, you also reflect on your seeing. You are conscious of your seeing, okay? So it's a process. It involves both level 1 and level 2. And it's spontaneous, no problem, okay? So it doesn't mean that you have to have first order ability come first for the time being, okay? And then the second order come in. No, it's not the case like that. It can be happening. You got my point? So the process is spontaneous. So I think for Confucius, it's the same. But I didn't present here. For me, I think Ernest Sosa, his reflection or reflective only emphasize on the perspective one, risk assessment, okay? And that really match his idea of, his safety principle, okay? So safety principle really show only part of the skillful reflection or Confucius reflection, which is a part of looking forward, perspective reflection, okay, make risk assessment. But my criticism of Ernest Sosa is that he ignored, or actually he doesn't like the idea of, another idea of externalness, the sensitivity principle, okay? And I think the sensitivity principle actually connected with the Confucius idea of retrospective, okay, reflection. So you have to pay attention to or be sensitive to what could be go wrong or what the mistake you had before, okay? And that's something I think Sosa doesn't really pay too much attention to. But a full sense of reflection, for me, should combine. It's a dual side, okay? It should have both perspective looking forward and the retrospective looking backward. So reflection, when it happens at a higher level, it always involves first order capacity, no matter it's five senses, your memory, your reasoning, or your intuition. You can be conscious of what you are having at the first order ability. But on top of that, you can also add on the reflection or the consciousness, or I also call attention. It's a higher order. You can be attentively seeing something. So they all happen. They can happen, okay, simultaneously in the process of achieving the goal or attaining the knowledge or the forming belief process, okay? So that's my idea that the bi-level virtual epistemology, it's not the idea that the metacognition always happen later than the first order capacity. The difference, the bi-level actually is the bi-level capacity, okay? And I mentioned that for Confucius, learning without reflecting is blind. Reflecting without learning is empty. So learning and reflecting can occur at the same time, simultaneously. Okay, so that's learning. It's kind of, you rely on the first level capacity. But for Confucius, a better way of learning, it should always involve reflecting. And that's a higher order, second order mechanism. So do I answer your question well?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, I like the idea that it can be spontaneous. So it has to involve attention, as you say, but it needn't involve like a
it's also higher order
process. Yeah, it needs to be higher order, but it doesn't have to involve a temporally extended process of reflection. Yeah, okay. I'm going to come back to you on the sensitivity point. I'm intrigued by that actually, but we have some questions now in the queue. So what I'm going to do is, I wonder if I can just go back to, we're coming to the end now, so I'm going to try and squeeze in with a question. If anyone else wants to squeeze in a final question, please, now's the time to put your hand up. I want to just go back to your remark, which was intriguing earlier about safety and sensitivity. So for those in the audience who don't know, safety is this idea that when you know, you don't just truly believe, but insofar as you believe truly. Sensitivity is kind of like the converse of that. It's not quite the converse. It's this idea that when you know, if it hadn't been true, you wouldn't have believed it.
Right.
You said safety was kind of forward-looking, whereas sensitivity kind of
risk assessment. Yes.
And that's the bit I'm really struggling to see what's going on there, because it seems to me if I were to evaluate, I mean, for one thing, safety and sensitivity, for most circumstances, insofar as you evaluate for one, you evaluate for the other and vice versa. They don't really come apart for lots of ordinary cases. It's only very special cases where they come apart. But I'm also not seeing how one is kind of forward-looking, one's backward-looking. I mean, can I evaluate my beliefs, my memorial beliefs, and evaluate whether they're safe? Kind of evaluate my beliefs about, the future, and evaluate whether they're sensitive.
Well, when you have the retrospective reflection, you not only retrieve what's in the past in your memory, but the focus is what went wrong, what the mistakes is, rather than what you have done something good or not. You don't need to retrospectively reflecting on what you have done nicely. It's only there was something went wrong, some mistakes in the past. That's something you need to retrospectively reflect on. Okay, but for perspective reflecting, it's always the right goal. You try to achieve the right one, the good one, and try to avoid the bad one. But how can you avoid the bad one? You should be sensitive to what could be went wrong, either from the past memory, you have done something wrong, the experience, okay? Or you put yourself in a skeptical scenario. That's also sensitive. Okay, skeptical scenario is something that you have certain goal. It's something good there you want to achieve, but you want to avoid the bad one, okay? Something bad happened. So you need a retrospective, be sensitive to those wrongdoing or mistakes or the skeptical scenario. And that's what I call, which is sensitive, use a sensitivity principle. It's very similar. I won't say it's exactly the same, but it's very similar. And we can say that, we can check Sosa. He mentioned that safety is better than sensitivity, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can see he doesn't like the idea of sensitivity. Yeah, so Knowledge in Perspective, his first book, he emphasized so much on perspective, not sensitivity, not the mistake. And when he first time mentioned Confucius, first time, very early, he only mentioned to know that you know. And he didn't mention to know that you don't know.
Yeah.
And when I asked Sosa, why you don't mention this? He said, well, to know that you know is enough. That's reflected knowledge. But I said, I disagree, So a lot of evidence showing that Sosa doesn't really care too much about the retrospective one, but only perspective. So I think, yeah.
Another way of thinking about this is the difference between luck and risk. So
yeah,
luck is essentially backward looking and risk is essentially forward looking.
Oh, really?
So imagine I survive a plane crash.
Yeah.
So looking backwards, I say, I'm lucky to be alive. But I can also look forwards. I go back to before I got on the plane, project forwards and think, gosh, I'm really a high risk of dying.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like two different. One is like after the event looking back. The other is like before the event looking forward.
Yeah.
And if you think of luck and sensitivity as anti-luck conditions or anti-risk conditions, what the difference then amounts to, it's not a difference in the principle, it's a difference in how the principle's used. Are you using it to look back after the event, or are you using it to project forward before the event?
Well, that's a good way to think about the issue there. Thank you, appreciate it. Luck and risk. Okay. But let me make a parallel between explanation and reflection. There are also two sides in scientific explanation, right? Mm-hmm. We can explain the past event or phenomenon to use the scientific explanation, right? But when it can explain well, it will shed light on our prediction, right? So prediction is we use the scientific explanation to look forward. But explaining the past phenomenon, which is we use scientific explanation to look backward. Okay, so the same explanation, there are two sides. Again, two sides of same coin. Okay, this time, the face one of the coin look forward, but the back side of the coin look backward, and then combined together as a scientific explanation or as a skillful reflection, which really show different direction. Okay, but you are right. I only get the feeling that it seems to me that safety principle by Sosa only focus too much on perspective reflection. So I bring in an idea that maybe sensitivity principle is something that we should look back, and that's something ignored by Sosa. But whether this idea of sensitivity principle can be totally used by retrospective reflection is something need to be considered. And I appreciate your question.
And then just one final thing, a small thing, but I can't have been the only one who was completely amazed by that passage you quoted from Confucius, where learning without reflection is blind, reflection without learning is empty.
Yeah.
So is Kant in the first critique? So of course,
yeah, I know. Yeah,
first critique. This says thoughts without intuitional content are empty. Intuitional content without concepts are blind.
Yeah.
Referencing Confucius, that's incredible.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I might be the first one to translate this way.
Okay.
In Chinese, maybe 99% of people don't translate this way in English. But I think for me, it makes perfect sense if we use the bilingual one. Okay, learning always come up at the first level, but reflecting as a second level. And their relationship is very similar to the Kantian idea that we can use the bilevel one to interpret Kantian idea there, okay? So if we have only first level cognitive capacity, we might go blind okay, without knowing the direction. But we can still alive, but it's blind, okay? And if we only use our reflection, the higher order one, it's empty because reflection, higher order one, always need the first level one as its object, simultaneously or non-simultaneously, okay? And so because I follow this kind of idea, so I realized it's a better way to translate Confucius passage there as the way I interpret. But maybe some Chinese philosophers would not agree with me of translating this way. But I'm happy to find this translation, okay, because it really matched my idea of the bi-level virtual epistemology in Confucianism. Yeah, thank you for bringing this up.
Well, that was great. We're out of time, but I hope you'll all join me in thanking. And I see. Well, first, I want to thank Ryan Gurney as well, who's from the Humanities Centre, who's been running this session for us. He's very helpful. He just posted a link to a little talk that Michael did for us, which is as part of the Antita Virtues project that I run. So Michael recorded something for us on the Confucian conception of wisdom. So that's the links there if anyone's interested.
Yeah.
Please help yourself.
Thank you.
And we'd like to thank Chienkuo and me for this really interesting talk. I think I know I've learned an awful lot the last 2 hours, and I'm sure everybody else has. So that was very useful. So thank you very much. Thank you for being our very first global epistemology lecturer.
Okay. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone else for coming. So we'll sign off now. Thanks, everybody.